What is the one leadership skill that if you master will have a tremendous positive impact upon your ability to impact your team positively? That skill is listening. My guest today is Christine Miles. Christine is the author of the book, What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? She is the founder and CEO of Equipped, a training and consulting company that helps leadership teams grow sales, develop people, and create cultures of understanding. She's developed The Listening Path, which is a transformational workshop that she has taught to Fortune 100 corporations and other organizations. She is an expert in the skill of listening, and we take a deep dive into why listening is important, how you can become more effective at listening, even if you know that you're a tremendous failure when it comes to that skill. The good news is Christine shares practical tips and frameworks in this discussion that if you use and apply them, will transform your listening ability. So enjoy my conversation today with Christine. Feel free to share it with other people. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Christine, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
You know, you have a book with a title that really struck my attention. What is it costing you not to listen? I know in my life, I've struggled a lot with listening, and it's something I'm always working on. Tell me, in a conversation between two people, how much is actually retained by the parties in a conversation?
Well, the statistics pretty bad, just to give your listeners a heads up. So there's retention and there's actually what we hear. So remember, we're not hearing everything that's actually said, but of the things that we do hear, only 17 to 25% is retained. So we are failing miserably, which is part of why I named the book what I did, which is the problem. What is it costing us? Because we know we're supposed to be good at listening. We know it's important. Universally, that's a pretty common answer. Yes, I believe listening is important. However, we're not really taught. We're told that we need to listen, but we're not taught how ever. So that's a big problem. So we're all failing for very good reasons.
What do you mean that about when you say we don't hear what is being said? What does that mean?
Well, there's the verbal stuff, right? There's the things that we verbally hear, and our brains are the biggest enemy of listening. There is so much going on that in our subconscious brain, that's a superpower that is distracting us and taking us off task. Now we're in this digital world almost all the time, it seems, right? Between phones and now Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. So there's a lot of things that are getting in the way from us being able to listen effectively anyway. So we're not hearing even the words a lot of the time, but there's a lot more to conversations. It's about hearing what's not said, not just what is said. It's uncovering or discovering really the meaning of the message, not just the words of the message. That's very different.
How do I hear what's not being said?
Well, there's an answer to that. And I'm going to say that we've made it simple. It's not easy. It's simple. You need the tools, right? You wouldn't go in the woods for a couple of weeks and say, I'm going to just go hiking and camp overnight and not take any tools with you. That would be crazy, right? You
Right.
wouldn't survive well. We're kind of entering conversations the same way. We're going in unprepared. So the first is to really understand what the tools are and realize this is a skill that needs to be learned and practiced. It's not something you can't white knuckle your way to being a better listener.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are some of those tools or skills?
Well, so I want to give you the solution, and that's important, but I want to make sure that people also understand the problem, because I think if you don't know what you're solving for, you don't know how to really enact the tools anyway. So one of the things that we have to be aware of, as I said, is that there's so many things interfering. So you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, well, I've worked very hard at being a better listener. I know it's something I need to do. That's half the solution right there. It should be something we're paying attention to. I often say, like, even if you don't go to the gym every day, just by virtue of the fact that you know you should work out or go to the gym, your chances go up that you're going to do something about it.
Sure.
Most of us aren't thinking, hey, you know what? I need to be a better listener. And how do I go about doing that? Because again, the brain's in the way. So, some of us are rehearsing or practicing what we're saying when we're listening. We're thinking, what am I going to say in response? Right?
Yep.
Some people are trying to mind read or think they know what the person should know. And by the way, this happens in our personal relationships as well as our business relationships. Mm-hmm. Some of us are already solving the problem. We're off to the solution right away, and our brain's going overdrive. So we start talking and telling and advising, and that's an interferer with listening as well. Now, we're taught how to tell, talk, and know. We're not taught how to listen. And so we become the experts, and that need to be the expert, or even if we are the expert, can really interfere with the understanding or the listening, which needs to happen first.
You said you were taught to tell, talk, and know. What does that mean? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Well, you think about our educational system in the United States. There's 0 years of education on listening. What do we teach kids and then adults how to do, even through college, grad school? We teach them how to be knowledgeable. We teach them how to give speeches. We teach them how to talk about things, give presentations. We don't teach them how to really listen, or even more so to listen to understand. So it's an assumed skill. We treat it like walking. You have legs, you'll learn to walk. You have ears, you'll learn to listen. So we're projecting, hey, we should really help people learn how to talk more. And then we're wondering why the world is filled with so much noise instead of more listening.
Now, when you say your brain gets in the way, I'm assuming that's just because of the dialogue that we all have running in our minds, even when we're involved in a personal conversation. I find for me often it's not my brain so much that stops me from listening, but it's my emotions. So someone says something and, I respond to it emotionally, and then that emotion then begins to affect the way I think and feel. So what work have you done in the link between emotions and listening and responding?
Well, first of all, it's a very self-aware statement, which I appreciate. And it's also very wise because so we think of brains as being logical, but we really have, very simplistically put, we have two parts of our brain. We have the logical brain and we have the emotional brain. Sure. The subconscious brain is what we call the limbic brain or the emotional brain. And that's where decisions are made. We know that now from the neuroscience. The brain science shows that people's brains light up. The part of the brain that lights up when buying, making decisions is the emotional brain. So you're exactly right. Like something happens emotionally and that subconscious brain is going into overdrive and taking you off task, right? Taking you off the listening task because you're filling in with your own story based on those emotions. Now, you have some awareness to that. Most of us don't. Most of us aren't thinking about the fact that we're always telling ourselves a story, or we're not thinking about the fact that hit me emotionally. We just go into autopilot. And so slowing down and understanding, listening to yourself differently, what story am I telling myself about what's being said, is part of how to become a better listener. That's why we focus on, both the self-awareness piece, that emotional intelligence of listening to yourself, as well as listening to others.
So it seems like what I have to get good at doing is almost disconnecting myself from myself in a conversation so that I can observe myself and then make adjustments in the middle of a conversation.
The tools help you do that. The right tools will help you do that. But you're very astutely onto something. I often say, I feel like I'm watching the movie and directing the movie at the same time. Because when you're in that kind of awareness, you kind of realize, hey, I know I have my own emotional things happening, or my story's going off, or I'm thinking about what I'm about to say, but it's honing in on the other person rather than that. And so you are kind of in a dual role. Now, you're not going to just start going, I'm going to stop that. The brain's too powerful. So this is also why the preparation and understanding the tools and having those tools and then practicing them is so key to being successful as a listener. Okay. And we're only taught, only 2% of people have any kind of listening training. So I'm a perfect example of that. I have a a master's in psychology. My first career, I was a trained certified structural family therapist, and I never had a course in listening.
That's hilarious.
Isn't that crazy? But I was noticed. I started when I was 22. I used to go knocking on people's doors at 22 as a family therapist. I don't know why they opened the door, but I was recognized as someone who knew how to listen in a way that built credibility. So even though I had no experience, no children, nothing, I'm 22,
right.
I was able to build credibility with the families because of what I understood about them, not what I told them. And so it was a differentiator in terms of my own success early, because I learned very young how to listen differently from my upbringing.
Tell me about that then. What was it about your upbringing that enabled you to be a good listener?
So there were really two primary influences, like many of us have, but were my parents. And my father was an entrepreneur. He grew up on a chicken farm, studied agriculture, sold chicken. Yep. Sold chicken feed. They called him a chicken shit doctor is what he told me.
Yes.
Right. What you feed the chicken matters.
That's beautiful.
It was but he cut his teeth selling chicken feed after being at Penn State. And then he parlayed that into a career at selling life insurance in Connecticut General. And this was when they really trained sales reps to understand their customers in a different way. So he knew everything about his clients. It was a very personal sale. He talked about his clients regularly. So I understood from his point of view how that drove his success in business. And then I had a mom who has psychological issues that she came by very honestly. She lost her mother from being born. Her mother died from childbirth. And so she was set up for it. And she was very warm and loving and beautiful and charismatic. But underneath the surface, what wasn't said was all this pain. And so my job was to understand that from a pretty early age. So those two influences taught me how to listen, and it was expected of me. So it was just part of our family norm. And I started overachieving relative to my actual abilities at a pretty young age because I had this other thing that other kids didn't have, which was paying attention to things weren't said, understanding my teammates on the sports field, understanding myself a little differently, the emotions of people, all helped me be more successful than I ever should have been.
So were your parents consciously teaching you how to listen or pointing out when you weren't listening? How did they do that?
Well, there was a lot of dialogue around it. And it's funny because my father just passed away in December, and we had such a beautiful goodbye. And what I was so profoundly struck by is even as he was getting closer to death, how he was so able to really control the conversation in a way that if he didn't quite understand something, he would slow down and really plug into it, ask questions, really uncover things without just, and he was really listening so intently. And I see that with my nieces now who are 23 and 16, they listen in a way that the way they ask, what they say. And I'm like, this was foundational, the way we were taught in our family. So I've just deconstructed what I learned very young and put it in a system so that anybody can do it.
Okay. As you were describing what your father was doing, it's particularly in his life insurance, the word empathy came to mind.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that there's a connection between empathy and listening.
There is.
What if I am not naturally an empathetic person? What can I do to become more interested in other people in a conversation so that I become a better listener?
Well, again, I appreciate the question. So empathy we're not all as empathetic, right? It's partially how we're raised. It's nurture. It's partially how we're wired. That's nature. And, we all have the capacity. We know the brain's flexible so that we know that we can improve our empathy. But again, it's a skill. So most people think you have to be empathetic and then you learn to listen. It's actually listening that leads to empathy. It's not the other way around. And I talk about in the book about sometimes you have to imagine your way to empathy. And so the problem with the word empathy in the definition is that I can feel what you feel. Mm-hmm. Well, so a lot of us have a hard time making that leap. Now, maybe I could try to imagine what you might feel. That's different. And that's at least a step in the right direction. So, but listening really, when you're in the moment and you're on a shared journey with the talker, the person that's telling, when you're really connected and through the tools you get connected, the empathy follows. It just happens. So there's not so much pressure to go, I have to understand this. there are things I don't possibly couldn't imagine feeling, right? Like, look what's going on in Ukraine. Could we fathom what that feels like? It's
Sure.
a painful place to go. I can imagine, but I can't feel it. It's too deep. It's too raw, but I can certainly imagine what that must be like.
So I find that very liberating, that I don't have to generate this whole heap of empathy that I don't have. But if I'm willing to listen, then the empathy will follow. Now, why is that? Why do I become more empathetic if I listen?
There's something that happens in, again, the subconscious brain, that we as humans mirror one another. And so when I'm allowing myself to slow down, my brain is in a calmer place, and I'm allowing your story to come to me, we're going to mirror those feelings are going to mirror one another. This happens all the time. We see it more around negative emotions, right?
Yes.
So if you're angry, I mirror you, I might feel angry. That's a mirroring process. The same thing happens around when you understand somebody. So it is liberating, because we put so much pressure on the listener to be, people feel like frauds because it's like, I'm faking it. I don't know how to do that. Well, of course you don't. You've never been taught. I just happened to be taught when I was very, very young. So it is, how do you get to success? As somebody who was an athlete, I was not a natural athlete. I willed my way into athleticism through practice and the right tools and coaching. So to me, it's the same thing. You may not be an Olympic athlete, but you can be a great listener if you apply the tools in practice.
Okay, so I know we're going to get to the tools and the practice, and I definitely want to get there. But I know that my audience are leaders of construction companies, and construction it can be a very volatile, confrontational, difficult work environment. And I'd like to ask, why is it that leaders struggle with listening?
Well, first of all, I've done a fair amount of work with companies in the construction space. And I used to work for an employee assistance program. So I did a lot of work with, with the trades and so forth. And it is a different environment, and the rules are different, right? But doesn't mean that people don't feel.
Right.
And so we're all human, and it all matters. So the reason it's so hard is we're simply not taught. Again, I think we are blaming people for not knowing how to listen when we really don't teach them how. And I think, I've talked with you a little bit and others that when you're a leader, you think you have to be the one that has the answers.
Right.
Really, leadership is about uncovering and discovering the insights in what your team brings to you. And that's really the heart of leadership, is listening. The answers to the organization or the problems are within the organization.
Okay, so let's explore that then. How do because many leaders, they think that they have to be right, they have to be smart, they have to be the expert because they're the leader. How do I shift myself as a leader into that role of listening and being more of a receiver as opposed to an initiator or a decider? Tell me about that.
Well, I'll give you another statistic. 77% of employees will tell you they will work harder and longer hours for an empathetic employer.
Right.
And so, and we know empathy is part of listening. So,
Sure.
That's an important part of it. And so discovering how to do that and making sure people want to feel understood and heard. Now, you might ultimately need to come to the answer, but being the expert just interferes with listening, because if you're solving everything, why do you need your team?
Right.
You need to help them learn to solve problems. And through listening, people uncover their own insights. I mean, I can tell you over my career, the number of people that have attributed me as being the smart one in the room when I've basically just helped them listen to themselves.
Yes.
And, that's the real magic when that happens. So it's combining that expertise with what everybody else brings into the room where you really get something powerful.
So let's talk about those tools then. What is the first tool that I need to learn to use if I'm going to be a good listener?
So there's a couple things. And the first one I'll talk about is what we call the 6 most powerful questions. So if your listeners take nothing else away, they can start to apply this right away.
Okay.
One of the principles that I'll share that is important to understand about this is listening well is what I call a slow down to speed up. So we want to solve problems quickly. As I said, that's the number one thing that interferes with listening, is wanting to solve the problem. And we all want to solve problems, get things done quickly. Again, I'll make a sports analogy. When you most scoring on the sports field happens when you pull the ball back and go across the field and then down. You're not just running down the field straight all the time.
Right.
And that's what can happen in businesses. We start running forward and we just sprint forward and we forget to stop, pull back, and take a look at the landscape. That's what listening does. And that's what these 6 questions allow you to do. So I'll run through them with you real quickly and then we can break them down. So the first question is, take me back to the beginning. The number of times we start solving a problem when somebody makes a statement with, like, a customer tells you a problem. Well, the room's too small. Well, that's a pretty generic answer, but okay, well, now I'll fix that. Well, we can widen the walls. We can take it down. Well, maybe that's not the real problem. So wait, take me back. Tell me where that started. And you get more of the story. The second one is, this is simple, is tell me more. We tend to ask very diagnostic and prescriptive questions that lead the story, the teller or the person sharing their story, down a road that may have nothing to do with what they're trying to share. So when you open that up, they tell you what's important. Now, the next one may feel a little unsettling to some of your listeners because in general, people in business have trouble with this one sometimes, but it's so important. And that question is, how's that make you feel? Now, a lot of people say, that's a very personal question. I could never ask that on a construction site. I could never say that in business. And the reality is feelings are flying all over the place, right?
Totally.
So you might as well just ask it, because rather than somebody venting or sharing their feelings, they'll tell you how they feel and you'll uncover something very important. Another question is, then what happened? And you can ask these questions in any order you want and as often as you want, but you'll get much more from the person when you don't try to shape the story. Another question, and it sometimes doesn't feel like a question to people, is this, it's just this imperceptible kind of, where you're talking with someone. And when that had, like, very good example, like what you just did, you're kind of nodding. And this is very important virtually, by the way, when you're working on Zoom and on the phone, that's a prompt that says, keep going. I want to know more.
Yep.
And the 6th question is, it sounds like you feel, right? Sometimes we have an idea how people might feel. We don't have to ask them, like if they're venting or they're angry.
Right.
It sounds like you're really, pissed off. You're really angry.
Yep.
Share that. So if you pay attention to really good journalists or interviewers, they're using these 6 questions all the time.
Okay. Which one would I start with? You've got take me back to the beginning. Tell me more. How does that make you feel? Then what happened? And then it sounds like you feel. Which one would I start with?
Well, if you're just starting a conversation and somebody's leading with a problem, it could be one of 2. It could be tell me more, or it could be take me back. But one of those 2 is a pretty good place to start. If you say tell me more, the likelihood is then you're going to still have to go back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it depends how much somebody shares with you to begin with. But what the goal is to get them talking rather than you telling.
Okay.
But so often, and customers in particular, start with the problem or what they think is the problem. And we start solving and we're fixing the wrong thing. Because knowledge, experience, and expertise is also an enemy of listening. The more we've seen something 100 times, the more advice we're going to be likely to give. And even if we know the answer, the person may not be ready to hear the answer.
Okay, so then how many questions do I need to ask so that I'm getting out of my own way and my own expertise and my own insights?
As you might have to ask those 6 questions, any number of those 6 times in a conversation.
Well, let me ask it a different way. How do I know when I've gotten beyond myself and I'm actually going to be able to either give some useful insights or help this person in the situation?
So when have you gotten it? When have you gotten the story is what you're asking, I think, right? When do you know it's time to kind of say, now I have the advice? And you're not nearly there once you've gotten the story. This is part of the slowdown. So the next step, and this is another tool, is really to reflect what you heard. I can't tell you the number of times, one person says something, the other person thinks they hear. Remember, 17 to 25% is heard, right?
Yeah.
And then we go on to the future as if we're aligned.
Yeah.
So I ask you, tell me more, take me back. How do you feel? Et cetera, et cetera. You talk to me for 3 to 5 minutes and here's what I'm going to do, Eric. I'm going to go, hold on a second. Let me see if I get you. And I'm going to repeat and summarize both facts and feelings, like in 30 to 90 seconds, what I heard.
Okay.
That is this is very important for leaders. Think about how many meetings we have. Think about how many conversations we have where this step does not happen. We assume alignment and there's not alignment. And what happens is, I thought you said this, you thought I said that, and we're off, and then more miscommunication and more wasted time, more products are ordered potentially. The customer's still not happy. The costs are inordinate, all because we didn't take that step.
Okay. So as I'm reflecting on what I've heard, how do I present that question in such a way that the person is going to be honest with me?
As you reflect?
Yeah.
So you're right about something. There's three, we call it three scenarios how somebody may react when you reflect. If I reflect what I heard, I'm also going to use another tool, which is I'm going to ask a question to affirm what I heard is correct. So I'm going to say, do I get you? Right. So I reflected. This is another tool. Do I get you? And you're either going to say yes and mean no. There's a term in the Urban Dictionary that I write about. Look it up. It's a sales term. It's called a grin, and it starts with an F. All right. So it's a Philly term.
Say it. It's okay. It's construction, so you can say it.
All right. So it's called a grin, right? It's a grin.
Right.
I'm going to nod my head, but I really mean you now. All right.
All right. That's good.
And so, but here's the thing. When you genuinely are attempting to listen and reflect, that's very rare. It's people that do more talking than listening that they get the grin. All right. So it does happen, but that's the nonverbal, right? The more common scenario, and this is what's so great, Eric, is that you'll say, hey, Eric, let me see if I get you. I summarize in 30 seconds. Did I get you? And you go, yeah, you got me, but blah, 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 blah. And then you keep talking. And then I get all that you missed. I have one of the members of my team. He said, sometimes I miss on purpose because when I say, do I get you? And I've missed, they start to remind me of what's important. And I know what their priorities are. I know what they want to focus on. And so he uses that as a tool to make sure he really is aligned and understands them.
As you're walking through this, I'm reflecting on how it takes an incredible amount of energy to listen well, and really an amount of self-control. And as a leader in a construction company, I can be running from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. with nothing but these conversations and problems. And, there's different degrees of issues that I've got to deal with. How is it that I can perhaps marshal my energies most effectively so that I don't go into a conversation that's important and miss what I need to hear simply because I don't have the energy necessary to focus?
Well, it's going to take practice before it doesn't feel like it's effort, right? So it's like if I said, we're going to run a marathon, you wouldn't expect to go out and do the 26 miles without running a mile first, right? So we have to get ourselves in shape. That's the first thing. The second thing is we got to know what's in it for us. So what's in it, partly that's in it for us, is when you give the gift of understanding, when you listen to understand, you get a lot more back. But in terms of a result, when you listen to understand first, you solve a lot of problems before they become real problems, and you get to solutions faster. So I often say, I can throw a football, so can Tom Brady, but he can get it down the field a lot more efficiently and to the right hands than I can. Listening is the same way. When you listen well, you solve the real issues and get ahead of things. Conversations become shorter, not longer, because we spend a lot of time talking about the wrong things. A lot of time.
What does that mean?
Well, again, because we don't really have alignment, we don't have, I don't really know what the problem is. We can beat our heads against the wall and handle a lot of miscommunication without even knowing that's what's interfering. I was with a client and a manager for an HVAC company this a couple months ago. We were having lunch and she wanted to talk about warranties and how she had two jobs. She was trying to manage the people and manage the warranties. She said, I don't have enough time. The senior leader, through kind of the process of listening differently, realized you can maybe salvage 10 grand a month in warranties, but if you put your energy somewhere else, we'll make $100K more easily. So it's a $90,000 shift. All because she was focusing on the wrong thing. But he knew how to listen and uncover that insight because he had practiced the tools and has used them. Otherwise, he would be like, well, let's figure out how to get you more time to warranties. Instead, he listened, pulled back, realized what the interferences were, and said, don't worry about spending as much time here. Let's put that time over there.
Why do people want to protect their egos more than they want to get to the truth?
I'm an optimist about people, so I certainly think there's some egos out there.
That was a pretty pessimistic question, huh?
Yeah, it was, but I understand because again, I do empathize with people who, because they don't know how to listen. So the old joke for psychologists is, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Yep. And the answer is one. You just have to be willing to change it, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's, if we create a common language around listening and understand the benefits, and we put time on task, then the adoption rate changes and we start to shift the paradigm. It's nobody's fault that the paradigm has not been focused on listening and it's been focused on telling. Any sales training that's out there starts with how important it is to listen, and then all they do is tell you how to talk about stuff.
So you use that idea of a common language, and we began with those 6 questions. The second tool that you gave us was reflecting what you've heard. The third is, do I get you? Mm-hmm. What's another tool I might use in a listening conversation?
Another one is to realize, and I think this will be helpful to your leaders, listening is not passive. So part of why I think people have a hard time with it is they think, I just have to let the person talk. And just go and go and go. And then my head wants to explode. Right. And so I get that. That's fair. But I had a guy that said, my ex-wife used to spend 9 hours talking about her 9 hours a day because I couldn't take it. I said, you're not married. I get it. So interrupting, and I want to say this, it's a cautionary tale, but an important thing.
Yep.
Interrupting to talk is a no-no. Interrupting to understand is really critical. So this is what my father would do, which was, I was mesmerized as he was kind of yelling.
Yeah.
So he'd go, how was your week? And I go, Dad, he goes, wait, slow down. Wait, let me see. And he would help me slow down so that he could comprehend it. Now he was slowing down in his mind, even though he was very aware. So he had to go even slower than I was used to, but it was such a reminder of the power of that. I don't know if any of your listeners listen to Howard Stern, but he's miraculous at this. What he does from an interviewing standpoint, he will stop somebody cold and go, they'll say something, they'll go, hold on. Stop, take me back, tell me more. And he punctuates those moments so there's clear alignment and understanding before you continue on in the story. So interrupting to understand is a very powerful tool.
Beautiful.
And we call that, those mini reflections along the way. If you're the guide, if you're taking a trip in the woods and you and your friend are backpacking, you're the guide. You have to help them stay on the main trail. You have to help them not get lost in the woods as the listener. And so being that force that really guides and helps you and the teller stay on the same trail is how you create the empathy, how you create the alignment, and how you solve the problems the most quickly.
Very interesting there, that interrupting to understand. I like that a lot. What about the role of physical cues? So I'm in a listening situation. I really have the best intentions, but nevertheless, off I go into la la land somewhere else. Is there any physical cues that I might be able to use that could bring me back into the situation without the other person noticing? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And again, we're going to have to practice your way to success, which is why we teach behavioral change, right? It's learning to use the tools and be present in the situation. The tools do the work for you. They calm your subconscious brain, but you're onto something with your eyes. So listening it with your eyes is important because people send you messages about how they feel with their bodies, right? And their physical cues. And again, we're in a virtual world a lot of the time. So one of the things you need to use is your eyes to listen, which is, hey, you make kind of a funny face there. What does that mean? Like, tell me more. And paying attention to those verbal cues to ask more, or to reflect, hey, well, did that upset you? Or that seemed like that bothered you? I was on a call with somebody and I said, how you doing? He's like, he made some sort of nonverbal gesture with I'm doing great. And I went, that didn't seem that didn't feel right to me. And then he went on to tell me that something very personal was going on and he was dealing with a family crisis because I didn't listen to his verbal answer. I watched his nonverbal answer, which was counter. And so you get more of the story sometimes by watching how people physically respond.
So there's the observing of others. I'm interested also in is there something that I can do myself physically? So I'll give you an example. I know that when I'm in a conversation and I feel myself wandering, I'll ball up the toes on my right foot and I'll say to myself, ground yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that from one of my mentors. And that minor physical action that they can't see helps me to come back into the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're practicing a mindfulness activity there, right? And your body helps do that. So I'm not going to dispute that. I mean, I think that's great. Although for those couple minutes or seconds, you're still off and you lose the person, right?
Yeah.
Hard. So let me ask you this. So if you're watching a movie where the story's really interesting, do you find yourself wandering off?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're back to that directing. So when you use the tools and you're in the conversation differently and you're asking the right questions rather than chasing all these other things and getting all over the place, your attention, it follows, it comes to you. So you don't have to, you're not white knuckling it anymore. And the reason we've been white knuckling it is because we're told to pay attention, right? Now, let's look at history, for example. If I could ask people, did you like history? It's a very black and white answer. I liked it or I didn't like it in school. One reason, my teacher taught me all about the facts and I had to memorize them, or they told me stories and it made me want to learn more. And so when you're in a conversation and you're using the tools and the map and the path, you're getting the story. And that story is more compelling than, and that's what holds your attention.
For me, at least, that's a second genuine insight there. Number one, your empathy follows. And number two, your attention follows.
Yep. Because we can't just tell ourselves to pay attention. Our brains have to.
But we do that all the time. We do that all the time.
Doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't work. We're told to listen, not taught. Our brains have to want to pay attention. And when you're in control and I know how to guide the conversation, you're much more interested in it. Because otherwise, you're just waiting for the other person to talk and hope that you're going to get something out of it versus I know exactly what I need to find out. I know exactly how to do that. I know exactly how to help the person feel understood and get out of the conversation and have something productive out of it. Is a total shift from where we've been operating.
Okay, so with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I have these tools. How do I use them in such a way so that I'm not just manipulating people and getting my own way anyway and making them feel good?
It's a very big question. Managers have been asking me that for years. And so, look, it's like anything. You can use tools for good or you can use them for evil.
Right.
And so there is responsibility. I will say a couple things. Don't ask these questions on an airplane unless the person you're sitting next to you want to actually talk to.
Yeah,
because
right.
I'm telling you, once you start listening to somebody differently, they are hooked and that is a differentiator. The most powerful story you can tell somebody is their own. And when you listen to their story, they are more inclined to want to follow you. So there is responsibility. Again, I believe the world's thirsting to be understood. And I believe that most people want to understand. If I ask husbands, wives, children, parents, what do they want? They want to feel connected and bonded and loved and give love to their families. I think the same is true in business. Most people are genuinely out to do the right thing. This is a way to do that more effectively and to help people feel better through the process.
Can you repeat that? The most powerful story, you just said that. I want to make sure I got that.
Sure. The most powerful story you can tell someone is their own.
There you go.
So when I reflect your story, Eric, suddenly you matter to me because I took the time to listen, to understand. And now you're going to look at me differently. Like think about our partnerships or, why do we have a 50% divorce rate? Because there's a gap in how we understand each other over time.
So as we're walking down these tools here, we got this idea of interrupting to understand.
Mm-hmm.
What's another tool that I might use?
So one of the things you can do along the way is when you interrupt is that mini reflecting that we talked about. So I kind of call this a listening sandwich. So rather than waiting till the end of the story, somebody talks for 3 to 5 minutes and says, then let me reflect. You can actually reflect along the way. So you've done this throughout our interview. You said, hold on a second. right? Let me see if I understand. And
Mhm.
you've repeated and made sure you got it before you moved on. That's a very powerful listening skill. That's more art than science.
Mm.
But exactly what you're doing is what the business leaders want to do. But
Mm.
before we move on to the next item, let me see if I get you.
Mm.
Reflect. Do I? What did I miss? Now we'll move on. I work with a CEO of a pharmaceutical company, an orthobiologics company. He does this very, very well. And he laughed. He said, well, you did teach me this 15 years ago.
Yeah, right.
I started laughing. I forgot about that. But he does, and he moves incredibly fast. But he just makes sure that there is a reflection along the way so that everybody's aligned before he moves on. And so that's another tool to interrupt, to reflect.
How will these tools help me to control my own emotions? Because when I'm in a conversation with someone, I know that, I personally don't do poker face that well. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of the folks that I work with don't do poker face that well. Mm-hmm. And so I'm afraid sometimes that in a conversation, I want to listen, and yet my face is telling them what I'm thinking or feeling. So will these tools help me with my own emotional response in a conversation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think poker face is overrated, frankly. Okay. I do. I mean, there's certain settings where it's helpful, but we're human, right? And so this is supposed to be a shared experience of genuine conversation. So, but yes, the tools calm those emotions and feelings down. And don't misunderstand, listening is an unselfish act initially. You just reap a lot of benefits on the other side. And here's one of the main benefits is that when you listen to understand, you earn the right to do a lot of things. And so, I can't tell you the number of times that people have said to me, I don't know why I don't mind it when you tell me something I don't want to hear. And I said, well, not for nothing, but I've spent a lot of time making sure I understood you before I dared to tell you what I think you should do. I learned this very early because for the first 5 years of my career, as I said, I was a therapist, and people would come into my office and say, I say, how do you want help? Well, tell me what to do. Tell me how to solve the problem. And I was like, okay. I had some pretty high level experience at a young age, and I'd go hook, line, and sinker right down that path. They tell me, I'd start, and then they'd go, I can't do that. And I was frustrated. I'm like, this isn't any fun. I'm giving you what you asked for, and it's not working. So instead, I would listen, reflect, understand. And I'd say, is it okay if I tell you what I think now? Is it okay if I tell you what I should do? And when you get permission, it's amazing how much more likely people are to follow that advice.
So that right there is a key. There's a key concept there about earning the right to tell people hard truths after you've listened to them.
Yep.
And then you framed the question in this way: is it okay if I tell you?
There's a book called the Challenger Sale. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it
Challenger Sale.
The Challenger Sale, and it talks about. This came out, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago. Forgive me if my timing's wrong, but it talks about how you have to really teach, tailor, and control in the conversation. All of which, the relationship sale is dead. We can't just do things because I like you or know you. And we know things get done for those reasons, but it's not enough in a complex sale. But one of the things they don't talk about is that when you try to teach, tailor, and control, you can just piss people off. Because guess what? People don't like to be told what to do. It's just a fundamental human nature thing. Right. But when you understand them, convey that understanding, they affirm that you understand them. Now you're in a different paradigm. Now you've earned the right. And in the leadership world, we call this social capital, right? It's how do you earn the social capital? With our customers, are we going to give them everything they want? Should you move the wall just because they say so?
Right.
No, sometimes you have to be able to tell them no. It's how you tell them no. And that understanding first is an important part of it.
So you could almost say this as a leader: if you're saying as a leader, why aren't they listening to me? Then perhaps it's because you are not listening to them.
It could be one or both of those things, right? It could be you're not listening to them. It could be they don't know how to listen to you. So if you're not modeling that, again, we're expecting people to come to the table when we're not showing them how. The good news is the conversations transform immediately. Even if you just use one of those questions, just one of those questions changes the game. I had a friend of mine who read the book, and she said, I was coming home with my son from college. This was at Christmas time. She said, he hasn't been talking a lot. And she and her husband were went through a divorce, and he said something, and she said, all I could think of is tell me more. It's the only thing that came to my mind. She was in the middle of the book. She goes, so I went to say it, and she goes, he's going to think this is so weird. And she goes, I just went, tell me more. And I thought, he's going to freak out. Like, you don't talk like that, Mom. And she said,
right.
He paused. And then he started talking for 15 minutes. And she said she found out things that she didn't know about him, what he wanted to major in, what he wanted to do. He hadn't had a conversation, all because of one simple question.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So what haven't we said that we need to say in this conversation, Christine?
That's a good question. I want to give that some thought. I think that it's important regardless of the industry, the world's changed. And if that we need to put time on task, we can't keep running at speed like we have been, expecting that things aren't going to create more consequences. The pandemic has changed things. The digital world has changed things. Customers' expectations are higher. We're under a lot of pressure to move fast. And so it's counterintuitive to want to slow down a little bit, to speed up. But it's incredibly necessary because we're at a turning point where they don't have it in them anymore to keep running at this speed without something shifting. People are breaking. We talk about the Great Resignation. Why is it hard to find workers? Why is it, because people went, I got one life to live. What do I want to do with it?
Yep.
And so there's a great quote from Maya Angelou that says, people will remember how you feel, not what you did, not what you said. So that's true across every industry because we're all humans and we have to help people feel better about the work, how they're working, who they're working with, and they're breaking.
It's interesting. I was reading Ecclesiastes this morning, and there's this particular verse that struck me. It says, better to have one handful with quietness than two handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind.
Wow. Great.
That was funny. That was awesome.
I feel undereducated at the moment that you're reading at that level in the morning. Good for you.
It's really interesting. Christine, I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. As we're wrapping up here, give the listeners one or two things they can do immediately to become a better listener. And feel free to summarize any of what you said earlier, please.
Sure. So go home and practice it with a loved one. Take one of the things that I mentioned, and I would suggest you start with those 6 questions. Just go home and gather a story. I'll tell you what will happen. If you try it on your spouse or whatever, you'll be like, he or she'll go, well, what were you up to?
Right. What do you want? What do you want?
That might mean we need to shift things a little, or you're going to have a game-changing conversation. We had a guy from a company that we were doing a workshop. He went home and practiced that. He said he got the first unsolicited hug from his daughter. 16 years old, that he had in 3 years.
Yep.
This is powerful. So that's one thing. And then, and look, I want people to read the book because it'll help them learn how to transform how they listen. So start putting some time on task. The tools are there. The book's there to be a handbook for you. It tells the story of how to do this. I had somebody that I met, I gave her the book and she said, I had to have a difficult conversation. I didn't know how to do it. I thought the answers are here. She flipped to the 3rd section. And she said, I just took a couple things away and it changed the conversation. So give yourself the handbook so that you can start to have different conversations. You have to this is a skill that needs to be developed.
So tell us, please, what is the title of the book?
It's called What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's also, you can go to whatisitcostingyounottolisten.com. And the audiobook for some of, because not everybody wants to read. The audiobook will be out probably the beginning of April.
Excellent. And that's wonderful. And Christine, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to just connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
They can go to equipped-people, that's EQUIPT-people.com, or text me at 484-252-1593. I'd love to hear from your listeners.
484-252-1593.
Yep.
Excellent. All of that information will be in the show notes, including links to your website and links to your book on Amazon. Christine, I really appreciated your time here today. I don't always ask this question, but I'm going to ask you, if I'm visiting Philadelphia, what is the one restaurant I need to go to?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
Because I know you're out there in Philly.
Yeah, I'm probably not the most versed in this. There's so many, most people would go to get a cheesesteak in Philadelphia. And so South Street is the place to go for that. So I don't know if anybody is interested in that. I live out in the suburbs of Philly. So there's a place called near Valley Forge Park called the Black Powder Inn, which is historically rooted. So that's a cool place, not far from me.
Black Powder Inn.
The Black Powder Inn, right out of Valley Forge Park, where Washington ate during the war.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. Well, I'll find that on the internet, link that in the show notes as well, in case somebody wants to visit the Black Powder Inn there in the Philly suburbs.
Thank you.
Christine, I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous. The insights have been tremendously helpful. And thank you for coming on Construction Genius today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for listening to Construction Genius today. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Christine. Just before you dash off, make sure that you get a copy of her book, What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? Link in the show notes. And if you are a senior leader in a construction company, a vice president, the CEO, the president of an organization, and you would like an outside voice to help you with some of the challenges you're facing in your leadership role, I have a couple of spots open in my executive coaching practice, but it's only for people who are in the high level of their organization and who have a specific issue or challenge in the realm of communication, accountability, or leadership that they would like help with. And if that's you, feel free to reach out to me on my website, constructiongenius.com/contact, and we can book in a short call to discuss if or how I can help you. My coaching is not cheap, and I require a 6-month commitment. But if you have a challenge that you'd like to address and you're willing to make that kind of commitment, let's at least have a discussion to see if there's a fit. Appreciate you listening to Construction Genius, and have a terrific day.